Okay, hi everybody, my name is Nathan Keller. Today I'm going to be doing a presentation on E.D. Hirsch Jr. That's the person that I did my research on. Um, I really enjoyed studying E.D. Hirsch Jr. because his views on his philosophy on education is one that's kind of interesting in that it's kind of a return to more classical views on education, but at the same time his reasoning as to why we should have these standards and this type of curriculum is one that's very modern in that he focuses on things like test scores and SATs and reading levels and things like that. Briefly, I'm going to go into a little bit about Hirsch's personal life. His full name is Eric Donald Hirsch Jr. He was born on March 22nd, 1928 in Memphis, Tennessee. He was raised in the same area that he was born in. His father was a wealthy Jewish cotton merchant, which allowed him to be able to attend a school named the Todd School in Woodstock, Illinois. Later on, Hirsch studied English at Cornell University and also received a doctorate from Yale University. His teaching career began as an English professor at Yale, and as an English professor, he focused largely on romantic poets, and he wrote several works, critical works, that were deemed as controversial by some, in that Hirsch focuses on what the author's intents were in writing the work and what the true meaning of a work is. He talks of how we need to understand the author's background and the author's intentions in their work to be able to understand the true meaning. And so that was one of his great focuses that actually kind of led into his later discoveries and his later philosophy on education itself. Later on, after Yale, Hirsch took a position at Virginia University as the head of composition, the composition program, where he actually created the philosophy that he's most known for today. While he was working there at Virginia University, he came up with an idea of relative readability in texts, and it was something that he often evaluated students on to see whether or not they understood what the author was intending to portray or convey in their work. And he evaluated students on how well they comprehended certain meanings of text. And while he was doing that, he noticed something very interesting. There were some specific passages about Ulysses S. Grant and Robert E. Lee and the surrender of the South during the American Civil War. And he noticed that some students from a different university had a harder time understanding the true meaning behind the documents, while students that had a better background on the history of the American Civil War were able to comprehend a little bit further the meaning that these letters that Ulysses Grant and Robert E. Lee had written, and also other works that were written about them. And so based upon this discovery that he had made, he kind of determined that schools, some schools are not teaching a wide enough background and content in terms of history and in many different subjects, to the point where students are able to read, but they don't have enough knowledge to be able to interpret what they're reading or what they find around them. And he wrote a book titled Cultural Literacy. And in this work, he talks about the necessary knowledge for an American citizen to be literate and to be able to participate actively in democracy and things like that. And he listed some things that he considered necessary for us to comprehend different aspects of classic writing, that things that the original authors took for granted. Lots of times when people write a work, they don't think, oh, my readers, are they going to know the history of me or the history of the country I'm coming from or the time that I'm in? They're just simply writing their work and trying to convey their message. And so Hirsch argues that it's necessary to have a wide background of knowledge of history and many different facts and things, so that we can actually understand the true meaning of what we're reading. So because of these discoveries, he created a foundation called the Core Knowledge Foundation, and he's actually actively participating in this foundation today. this foundation has created a core knowledge sequence, which essentially is outlining things that students need to know and learn, necessary knowledge so that they can become literate and have a reading level that's much higher than the current average level in the United States. One quote that I really like that Hirsch states is, in today's education, reading is taught as if it's a transferable skill, and it's assumed that once children learn how to convert printed symbols into sounds and words, or to decode, they can be taught to read anything by practicing strategies such as find the main idea and question the author. But he argues that essentially this is not the case, that we must also have a sufficient background knowledge in order to be able to truly understand the meaning or the intent of an author in writing their work. And one thing that was really interesting about Hirsch's teachings is that he's created this curriculum or these standards that him and his colleagues argue that are necessary for all students to have in order to raise their reading level. And one of the things that he uses to back up his argument is our SAT scores, and the fact that reading levels have not really gone up despite recent efforts in education to elevate those reading levels. And his reasoning behind that is that we're not focusing still enough on the content and the knowledge that students are acquiring. There's too much of a focus on free thinking in a way, and he's been criticized for that, saying that he's ultra conservative in education and things like that, when in fact he's actually very liberal. So it's kind of an interesting irony there. The Core Knowledge Foundation and headed by Hirsch have had a great influence on today's education. We can see evidence of it in things like the Core State Standards Initiative and No Child Left Behind Act. These policies that have been created recently are striving to raise the reading level of students across the nation in all grades. Unfortunately, they haven't had the desired effect or the effect that was intended. And Hirsch argues that their intentions are great, but they're still not focusing on a specific enough curriculum that requires teachers to teach very specific content so that the students can acquire that necessary wide-ranging background. One thing that I kind of thought was interesting is that this affects teachers in that there's if a school adopts this philosophy, teachers are restricted to a very specific amount of content and a very specific curriculum that they have to teach. It can be very beneficial for students who are, let's say, below average or below the curve. But in my opinion, those students that are more advanced can actually be held back by this kind of teaching. And it's a great responsibility that teachers and administrators have to provide outlets for those students who are progressed a little bit farther than their peers, to be able to continue to learn at their level and not learn things that are actually stunting their progress or their growth. I also feel that if we focus so much on content, it's necessary that teachers and administrators assure that this content that they're being taught is still relevant to them. I've found that in my life, when I'm taught a whole lot of content and facts, it's very hard for me to connect the dots, so to speak, to be able to make them still relevant in my mind. And because they're not relevant, I then forget them shortly after I've learned them. And if teachers are able to continue to make this content that they're teaching relevant to the students, then I think that this philosophy that Hirsch has on education can be very beneficial, and it really will help students have a wide background of knowledge, and will be able to truly interpret and understand any kind of information or document that's given to them. I really enjoyed learning about E.D. Hirsch. I think his philosophies are interesting. They're innovative in a way that's kind of going back to the basics of education and a more classic view on what should be taught. But I do think that there's potential to come up with more innovative ways on how we assess or how this content is evaluated and retained among the students. I hope you guys like my presentation, and thank you for your time.